Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Enabling Student Action webinar. My name is Angela Andrews, and I'd like to thank our panellists, Britt, Kirsty, Sue, Melanie, and Jace, for joining us this afternoon. And I'd also like to welcome you, our online audience, watching from computer screens across the country to this webinar. For those of you who may not have met me or seen me before, I'm a member of the team at Cool Australia. We are a national not-for-profit organisation, and we provide free-to-access curriculum-aligned resources for teachers, which are available from our website. We also organise Enviro Week every year in August. This is a national week of action designed to inspire students across the country to participate in a range of environmental activities and events. Now, we're lucky enough this afternoon to have a cross-section of teachers and environmental educators who've agreed to share their stories and experiences with us about the kinds of activities and strategies they've undertaken to inspire young Australians in the areas of the environment and sustainability. Now, we're going to be hearing from each of these 5 panellists in turn, and they will share with you the kinds of strategies and programs they've undertaken in their schools and organisations. After hearing from each of these panellists, we're then going to invite you to ask any questions that you may have to ask. Now, the best way for you to get involved in our conversation this afternoon is through Twitter. We have set up an EFS hashtag for you guys to participate. So if you'd like to get involved in that Twitter conversation, you need to jot this down. Our hashtag is EFS chat. So that is EFS CHAT. So that is our hashtag for this afternoon's Twitter conversation. So please do get involved and ask lots of questions. So after all of our panellists have been involved in that Q&A opportunity at the end of the webinar, we're going to then encourage you guys to continue that conversation both well into this evening and in coming weeks about how we can continue to engage our students. So what I'd like to do next is to throw to the first of our panellists this afternoon, who will share with you some of their experiences with regards to inspiring students to get involved in sustainability programs. So the first of our panellists today is Britt Gow. So Britt, I'll ask you to introduce yourself to our audience across the country and to share with them some of your stories.
Hi Angela and Jason, thanks for inviting me, and welcome to all our listeners. I teach at a small rural school. Hawkesdale College is halfway between Warrnambool and Hamilton in the Western District of Victoria. We've got 240 students from age prep up to 18-year-olds. And over the last 12 years, I've been teaching VCE environmental science at the school. Over the last 5 years, I've also taught students online VCE environmental science. And each school holidays, we head out for study camps up to the Grampians or to Apollo Bay and stay at the YHA Eco lodges there and participate in a whole lot of hands-on activities. Of course, online isn't the best way to teach environmental science because you'd like all your kids to be out in the field doing biodiversity work or surveys, but we do get that opportunity at the study camps, and also each student has a supervising teacher in their school with which they do the hands-on experiments. We've been involved with the Kids Teaching Kids conferences over a number of years, and it's been great to see the students who attended Lawn in Year 8 also enrol in VCE environmental science and all the things that they've learnt in between those times. I think in a small rural school, our students get a huge range of different opportunities to participate in community activities, including lots of tree planting on farms. We've installed bird boxes. We've got a lovely kitchen garden that we use in our canteen in our food technology wing. We've recently installed solar panels, and we've got Ag Science elective up and running, looking at sustainability issues within the Year 9-10 curriculum. So it's an ongoing process at Hawkesdale, and it's been wonderful to be a part of over the last 10 or 12 years.
Thank you so much, Britt. That sounds like a fascinating story, and I'm kind of interested about the challenges that you guys may have be facing there, just in terms of being a rural school and access to resources and materials, as well as the distance education that you offer. So I'm sure there'll be plenty of people in the audience who'll have some questions to ask you about that as we proceed this afternoon. Thanks so much, Britt. We're now going to turn to Kirsty from Ceres, and Kirsty will introduce herself and share some of her stories from her organisation. Thanks, Kirsty.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. So nice to meet you, and happy Wednesday. It's great we're all here. My name's Kirsty Costa, and I'm the Head of Education at Ceres, which is a community environment park over in East Brunswick in Melbourne. At Ceres, we provide excursions and incursions for students and for teachers of all ages, from early childhood through to secondary and tertiary students. We also do incursions where we go out into schools, and my role as well is to work in the outreach team, and we deliver a program in Victoria called Resource Smart Schools, which some of you might be familiar with. We work with over 300 schools, and basically my job's to go in and act like a coach and help students and teachers with their environment projects, and that's funded by our state government and our Department of Ed and local councils. So it's really big in Victoria, and it's a real pleasure to be part of the program. Something that I specialise is, I wrote a program a few years ago called Do More with Less, which is a student leadership program, and something that we identified is that students don't often get the time to get together and actually plan their projects, and that seems to be a real pitfall because they get really excited and they want to jump into it, but they haven't thought things through, and eventually they tend to burn out or things don't work out. So we really support students and teachers with planning their projects. And the other area that I'm really interested in is behaviour change, and I think there's some really amazing things that we can do. I feel like at the moment that sometimes we work harder and not smarter on our campaigns, and I'm particularly interested in creative ways of communicating, catching people's attention. One of my favourite things that's happened recently is I was doing a speech in an assembly at a high school in Melbourne, and all of a sudden a whole lot of the Green team members jumped up and did a flash mob to actually to promote Enviro Week, would you believe? So yeah, I'm really into making things really exciting and creative, and not just going on the same old things that we've ever done. And in fact, when I work with students, I tell them you're not allowed to do a speech at assembly and write an article in the newsletter, but that doesn't cut the mustard anymore in terms of student actions. So I really look forward to this conversation and talking on Twitter further about it as well. Thanks, Ange.
Thank you so much, Kirsty. I'm really kind of interested in some of the things that you mentioned just now. I'm particularly interested in the fact that you guys are trying to offer a range of, I suppose, programs and activities all the way from early childhood up to tertiary into the community, which must be an incredible challenge. But I'm also really excited about the things that you've mentioned in terms of creative, innovative, practical solutions that will kind of inspire and excite people. So I'm sure many of our audience here today have lots of questions to ask you via Twitter. Remember that if you are listening around the country, whether it be in your lounge room or in your school hall or school staff room, please make sure that you tweet in your questions. Our hashtag is EFSChat, and we really look forward to hearing some of the questions that you'll be asking this afternoon. I'm now going to turn to Sue Martin, and Sue will introduce herself and some of the activities that she's undertaking at her school. Over to you, Sue.
Thanks, Angela, and welcome. My name's Sue Martin, and I work 3 days a week, and I feel very privileged to be the Environment Officer within a boys' high school in Sydney. It's a Jesuit school, so it's in the independent system. So being independent, when the school identified it wanted to be a sustainable school, it could work within not within the parameters of a system, which is very lucky. So I've worked here for probably 6 years and have started some student programs that sometimes they have worked and sometimes they haven't, but always wanting to get participation by students, which can be hard, being all boys. But some things that we've, I think, have been really lovely are our Earth Hour breakfasts, where our students take leadership in planning and putting it on. And now it becomes just every year it's part of the calendar. So it's sort of expected that the students will participate. But there's lots of other ways that students get involved, and we have co-curricular through the primary school, junior middle school, and the senior school. And being involved with lots of school networks has been a lovely way to get students enthused and talking with each other. At the moment, North Sydney Council have got a couple of high schools together, and the students come together and talk about projects. And Take 3 has been a really lovely organisation where the kids can think about a really simple thing of just collecting 3 pieces of plastic and using that to enthuse other students in some projects. We've used our house system within the school to get student participation, and so each house has an environment leader, and that student can be sometimes good, sometimes not so good, but their sustainability projects are what they have decided on within the house, and so it becomes a very personal project for that leader, and I'm there as a support for that house sustainability project, and that can bring up some really left field, out of the box, where they'll dress up and put on some environment, getting students involved, or Captain Planet comes out sometimes, and a bit of singing, which is always a bit interesting. And one time the boys identified that would be really lovely to know how much waste, and the school cleaners were really supportive, and one year one assembly collected every bit of rubbish and put it on a big tarpaulin, and we did a movie of how much rubbish we collected, and so the school have worked with the boys when ideas have been generated. So we've been very lucky, and that we've got lots of good things, bad things. Our walk to school day, some years the only people that walked were the school executive, which was a bit sad. So some things work, some things don't work. But Angela, very happy to answer or give tips to any school that is in a similar situation with all boys. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Sue. One of the things that I really kind of like about your stories is, I suppose, the refreshing honesty, because there are sometimes some great successes and sometimes there are things that don't work so well. I've also been kind of interested about some of the challenges that you may face working in an all-boys school environment, especially with secondary boys who have many other distractions out there. And I'd also, I suppose, would love to learn more as the webinar progresses this afternoon about the sorts of inter-school networks and how they may have assisted your particular school, and the involvement that you guys have had with local council and the ways in which local council may have been able to support the sorts of activities that you guys have been undertaking. And to finish off, I love the idea of having all of these teenage boys singing and dancing around Captain Planet ideas and creating movies. So it seems as if you guys have had some great success in encouraging your students to get creative when it comes to the areas of sustainability. So we'd love to hear more as the afternoon progresses. Remember, for those of you watching around the country, whether it be in your school staff rooms or at home, we'd love you guys to feed in your Twitter questions to us. Remember that to participate, all you need to do is send your questions into Twitter with the hashtag EFSChat. Alrighty, we're now going to move on to Melanie, who is from Melbourne Zoo, and she obviously will have some interesting stories to share with us about the activities that she's been undertaking in the zoo and engaging students in environmental action. So over to you, Melanie.
Thank you, Angela. First of all, thank you for inviting us along, and also hi to all the other panellists. It sounds like there's some really exciting things going on. Those stories are fantastic. Just to start off, to give you a bit of context about my role and the position of what we do at the zoo as teachers. I work for Zoos Victoria. I'm based at Melbourne Zoo. I'm a Learning Experiences Officer there, which involves pretty much like a team leader of a group of I think we have about 10 teachers on my team. We also have some teachers out at Werribee Open Range Zoo, and we also have a small team out at Healesville Sanctuary. And there is also a central team as well. So that's the wider team that I work in. All of us are involved in education of students that visit the zoo. So a little bit like a series, we would deal with students coming in on excursions from kinder to year 12 and a couple of tertiary institutions as well. And at the moment we're involved in delivering a lot of programs. But one of the things that is quite exciting and a little bit challenging is that we're really changing the way that we're approaching education in Zoos Victoria. So we're really starting to take on a lot of ideas. I suppose in our practice and our theory is being transformed, I suppose. And one of the key ideas is we want to get students involved in changing behaviour in their lifestyles, but also changing behaviour in their schools and in their communities as well. So everything that we're trying to do now is towards transformative learning and getting kids involved in that. So one of the ways that we do that, or the idea, I suppose, the theory, there's two parts to it. There's a theory and then there's the practice, the way that we do it. So the theory is very much grounded in education for sustainability ideas. So it's built on that understanding of respect. In terms of the content that we deal with, that's very much around conservation issues. So we take an ecological sustainability concept or issue or problem, and we would build our understandings around that. One of the other things that we're also thinking about is we use those ideas and we think about, in terms of practice, we use a framework. So the framework that we use at Zoos Victoria is called CUA, which is an acronym for Connect, Understand, Act. And that underpins a lot of the learning experiences that we build and opportunities that we build for students at Zoos Victoria. So in terms of, I'll just explain a little bit about Connect, Understand, Act, and all the teachers out there will be quite familiar with this because it has its roots in the inquiry model or inquiry learning. So the Connect experience is very much trying to pull apart these ideas of emotional competency but also ethical development. So it's about looking at what children are their value system already, and influencing their value system to have those ideas about respect, and also thinking about, in terms of emotional competency, their ability to empathise, and empathise with not just other people, but also empathise with other living things. So clearly we would use all our animals at the zoo and within the organisation to create that empathy in children. In terms of understand, or the concept of understand, the skills that we're looking to promote are things like the children or the students' cognitive capacity in terms of problem solving and critical thinking. These kind of things, when you're presented a conservation or an ecological sustainability issue, it's really trying to pull together lots of understandings from different fields. So we try to bring in ideas that are from fields like economics, political science, social sciences, as well as natural sciences like biology and ecology, and bring them all together to look at the problem from different perspectives or different points of view and understand how those things interrelate as well. And obviously ACT part is a big part for us. So in terms of the ACT part, we're really looking at trying to get kids to participate and also be involved in decision making. So they're really actively building their skills to be an involved citizen. I suppose, in a nutshell, if we could put it in that, what we're trying to work towards is promoting active citizens, and also to empower students to act towards a desired future. So they're looking at these issues that involve animals and conservation of wildlife and wild places. They're bringing all of those different areas together, different perspectives, understanding, bringing their emotional or personal perspectives to it as well, and then they're thinking about the desired outcome that they would like for wildlife and wild places, and ultimately themselves, and that they're acting towards that. So that, I suppose that's it in a nutshell. Thanks, Angela.
Thank you so much, Melanie. You know, for me, that's been really kind of a fascinating introduction into the work of the zoo, because not only are you guys thinking about, you know, animals that are available for students to learn about, to understand a little bit more about, but what you're doing is that you're taking that kind of experience between students and the natural world and expanding it through to students being able to develop a sense of empathy, respect, developing their core values and personal beliefs into that active decision making and involved citizenship. I'm really, really impressed with that model. It sounds fantastic, and I'm sure that people across the country have got lots of questions that they would like to ask you. Remember to please feed those questions in via Twitter. Our hashtag is EFSChat. I'm now going to pass over to Jason Kimberley from Cool Australia, and he's going to share with you some of the things that we're doing at Cool Australia. Over to you, Jason.
Yeah, thanks, Angela. Jason Kimberley here, CEO of Cool Australia, and we provide online curriculum resources for teachers all across the country that are all aligned with the national curriculum. And the idea behind that is to make teachers' lives as easy as possible. We speak to a lot of teachers, and one thing we hear is, I don't need another job. So Cool Australia fills that niche of helping teachers address the national curriculum and helping them to get sustainability understandings into their lessons. So we do things a little bit differently. We are a little bit different to traditional education sustainability, where we really step outside and really work with English teachers, maths teachers in particular, also science teachers, geography teachers, music, art teachers across early learning through to year 10, and a kid might be learning their year 8 maths, but they'll also be getting an understanding about biodiversity at the same time, so that year 8 maths teacher can go to the Cool Australia site, enter year 8 maths, and by the way, this is the person who thought, what the hell has this got to do with me? And now we can say, I'm glad you asked. Year 8 maths, enter, and down will drop a dozen learning activities that are specific to a year 8 maths student, talks to the national curriculum at their level of understanding, and they can incorporate energy, biodiversity, water, whatever it might be, into that maths lesson. So that's what we're doing most of the year, but we have a fantastic week at the end of August called Enviro Week, and back in 2009 we had this genius idea that we're going to have the next Movember for our environment, and people are going to come out in droves and take action and change behaviour, and 200 people registered in year 1. So not to be put off by that, we refocused our energies around education and schools. We thought, this is where we work, this is where we need to focus. So the Enviro Week has slowly built up to the point where 460,000 students in the last 5 years have participated in Enviro Week, and Enviro Week's all about taking on a challenge and creating good habits to last a lifetime. So we really see Enviro Week as our week of action, where the curriculum materials that Cool Australia run throughout the year really come to life. And I've been having a little trawl around the website this morning, and some of the a lot of the feedback we get from schools is Enviro Week's a great opportunity to reinvigorate existing programs, but it's also a great place to start new programs, because, you know, for some people double-sided photocopying is still a revelation. So we're working with lots of different schools at different levels of sustainability. So Green Grove in South Australia have taken on the Green Thumb Challenge, And this year we have allocated a little a character for each of these challenges. We've got the Green Thumb, it's all about planting native trees and growing food. We've got Sparky, who's all about energy saving. We've got Foodie, who's all about eating fresh and back to the tap. The Waste Warrior, who's all about putting things in the right bin. Trader is all about buying nothing new, swapping with existing, and our Wild Child character, which is all about getting back to the bush. So the Golden Grove in South Australia are taking on planting an indigenous food garden, replacing exotic trees with natives, and creating a butterfly attracting garden. All over in WA, the Mercedes College are taking on the Trader. They're revamping old toys and dolls. They're donating them to charity and using the sewing skills learnt in home ec. So this whole integrated approach, bringing things together for Enviro Week. And this is all student, in most cases, all Enviro Week activities are student-led. It's a great opportunity for leaders and green team leaders in particular to take on these different challenges. They're also sewing carrying bags for people in hospital so they can discreetly carry around their drips and medications. And they're reading newspapers to people in these homes as well, and they're sharing their time by doing that. One other one that's doing in St Augustine's in South Australia are taking on the Wild Child Challenge, and the senior students are leading the younger students in fun nature walks and activities at lunchtime. So back to what Mel from the zoo was saying about this connect, understand and act. So we're great believers at Cool Australia, particularly for Enviro Week, about creating good habits to last a lifetime. And our dream is for things like education for sustainability and things like Enviro Week to just be normal business practice, that it's not a big deal to go out and do these things. They're just a smart, sensible, money-saving way to act. So that's a little bit about what we're doing at Cool Australia and Enviro Week at the moment, and there's still opportunities to sign up. We're at about 120,000 participants for 2014, and we're hoping to crack last year's record of 160,000. So teachers, enviroweek.org, get around it.
Thank you so much, Jason. Isn't that a great story? We were in your first year, you started with 200 students getting involved, and this year we've got over 120,000 students already registered. That's just a phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal achievement. So well done to you and the rest of the team. And the other thing and the other thing I also noticed was that, you know, students are getting involved in so many different kinds of activities. You know, it's just a fantastic, diverse range of different programs that they're getting involved in, which is just absolutely fantastic. So if you have any questions around the country that you'd like to ask Jason about Enviro Week or any other activities, remember to get involved via Twitter. Our hashtag is EFSChat. Now look, this afternoon we've already had many people send in their questions via Twitter, and I'm going to now kind of open up our discussion to the whole panel, where they will have an opportunity to answer questions that have been sent in via our audience from across the country. And so one of the first questions that has been put forward this afternoon was a question that has been directed to Sue Martin and her involvement in secondary boys' schools and how she has been able to get secondary boys excited about some of these environmental activities. And second of all, Sue, not only how do you get boys involved, but how do you also get the support of other teachers across a large, busy school such as Riverview? How do other teachers find the time to get involved in these sorts of environmental programs?
Thanks, Angela. I might, one of the first things I did when we launched our Environment Charter, so the Environment Committee put together some of the things we'd like to do, and it was very simple. You know, we were going to not waste water, not turn off lights, and tread lightly. So very simple policy. And when that went to a staff meeting, I did a really simple activity that anybody could do. I sent around post-it notes, and I asked every teacher to write down something they'd like to see happen at the school, and it took 5 minutes, and from that activity I got just positive. It was just all positive, and some things that said, you know, we want to car share and we want to do this, and a lot of them aren't possible, but I'm going to share with you the post-it note that sits beside my desk from I don't know who did it, but it was just beautiful, and it inspires me to keep going, that I know the staff are on board. But I had climate skeptics that really tore me down whenever I mentioned the word climate change. So I had barriers that I had to tread carefully, but just that post-it note activity meant that I could then say, staff have asked for this. Getting boys involved is really hard because in New South Wales, the Who Cares research shows that the people that least care are boys between 15 and 25. So I know I'm working with a clientele that is a bit resistant, but it's amazing how you ask some students to get involved and they will blossom. They just blossom. And so last week we had our first ever tree planting expedition, and I think at the beginning of the week I had 5 students coming, and I said that's success. That's success for us. But at the end of the week I had 12. And more than I could, just write. And every boy came, and so they might not ooze enthusiasm, but when given the opportunity, they do blossom and take it up. So I know that probably there's lots I could say, but I'll share the love. I'll share the love, Angela. So.
Thank you so much, Sue. That's great. I love those sorts of stories. Britt, I know that you're also working in a secondary school. What sorts of strategies have you undertaken to try and get senior students involved in some of the environmental activities at your school?
And I have a range of students too, Angela. Students that perhaps it's not their first choice of subject, but they end up in the elective. And I think it's important that you give them a choice of different activities and an opportunity to take leadership roles. So one of the projects that we did following a trip to Singapore in January, which was the Global Youth Environment Conference, we were funded by a local wind farm to attend that, as well as used crowdfunding. And so we presented to the wind farm executives just recently, and the students were responsible for putting together the slideshow describing their trip to Singapore, and they had a choice of how they could present it and the photos they showed, and they took the role, and it was their day. So that was a great way to celebrate the trip and also to thank our sponsors for sending us over. And giving them a leadership role within the school. So if you can encourage them to throw a kitchen garden party, or to run a nude food lunch day, or organise a book swap day. If you give them leadership opportunities and a choice of activity, often they'll embrace those opportunities, and that's when kids might surprise you. They do need support, some kind of structure and encouragement and just monitoring often, but the first few times they learn lessons and take it from there. So it's always good to see them progress over the year. And it's not just sustainability skills, it's communication skills, it's persistence, it's risk-taking, it's a whole lot of other important 21st century skills that they learn along with the knowledge of sustainability. So I think giving students choice and leadership opportunities is really important when they're involved with a sustainability project.
Thank you so much, Britt. I really am kind of interested in that notion of providing choice and leadership opportunities to students. I suppose that choice and that sense of autonomy that they then have is a really effective way of getting those students involved. Kirsty, I'm going to pose the same kind of question to you, because I know that when you were speaking earlier on in our webinar, you were talking about the importance of creativity and I suppose inspired innovation. What sorts of activities would you recommend for senior secondary teachers who wanted to get some of their students involved?
Good question, Ange. Look, I would apply this across the board, not just to senior secondary, but to primary teachers as well. Sometimes the pitfall that we fall into is that we try to think of the projects that we think our students would like. Actually, I can see that's happening a bit on Twitter, and my advice is that you've got to get them to build up a bit of ownership and discover this stuff for themselves. One way you could do that is to actually do an audit, and that sounds like, when we say the word audit, that your eyes glaze over, but actually it's about working out where things are at and where you want them to be. And so it might be walking around the schoolyard at lunchtime and picking up all the rubbish and then measuring it and then working out what you want to do to be creative around that. So things that I've seen that are awesome. This is like a very famous Kirsty story, so apologies if you've heard this before, everyone, but I love, there's a secondary school out in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne that had a huge litter problem. So they worked out that they needed to create a heart connection for people. We know that as education in the environment. So they chose the local platypus as their mascot. So they didn't tell anyone. They had a student dress up as a platypus, and the student walked around at lunchtime and high-fived every student that they could see putting rubbish in the bin. And then they didn't tell anyone why they were dressed up as a platypus, and FYI, if you're going to do this, make sure that you've got a bodyguard with the platypus, because otherwise they could be susceptible to being tripped up. But they then launched this whole campaign that when you dump your rubbish, you dump on the platypus. And so they had platypus spray painted on their bins, on their sewers, leading to drainage. They did show some pretty shocking photographs of platypus, but often when you ask students, why do you think we need to pick up litter, their answers are, the teacher told me to, or we need to keep our school clean. So I think that there's a real, we've got to be really creative with this, and I think we're experiencing a bit of sustainability fatigue in Australia. You know, that word in itself is problematic. So we've got to challenge people with their concepts and catch their attention and surprise them in different ways. And, you know, I just think if it's not fun for the students who are running it, then it's not going to be fun for the people who are participating. So I love that, you know, choosing mascots, and the zoo's another great way. They've got a great website. I'm doing a plug for you. But, you know, they've got a great website called Act Wild, and there's lots of great endangered animals and animals that students can choose there as well. So, yeah, I reckon, you know, being really creative like that is just so effective and fun, and people talk about it all the time, and now this school doesn't have a litter problem. And, in fact, their maintenance man apparently actually has his lunch break. So it's good news all round.
Thanks, Kirsty. That's a fantastic story. Once again, we're hearing example after example of schools that are trying to create and inspire this sort of action amongst students through drama, dance, music, the creative arts, in order to try and really get students involved. They're just some fantastic examples there. I wanted to return back to both Sue and Britt briefly, because there have been a couple of questions that have come in via Twitter with respect to the ways that these sorts of schools are trying to engage with other organisations outside the school sector. And so I might first of all throw to Sue for a moment and just kind of ask Sue to tell us a little bit more about the ways that her school has connected with other schools and other organisations outside the school to inspire students. Thanks, Sue.
Thanks, Angela. I suppose in New South Wales we talk about having a SEMP, a School Environmental Management Plan, and for us there are 5 aspects of our SEMP: school grounds, school resources, students, teachers, and one that's as critical or as important as all of the others is community and outreaching with community. So we see that as really important, and for us it is about making connections with local government, and for us that's Lane Cove, which is a small council, but they do have a really lovely environment team, and so it is about being on email contact with council. And so last week I just sent a message off to the bush care officer about, Helen, what gloves should I wear, get for tree planting? And so it was about having an open communication and getting advice, because I'm not a bush care person and I needed that help. And Helen came straight back with where they get their things. So that's just one example, but it's about working sort of together. The other question you asked, Angela, was about networks, and for us it is important that we are sharing our stories, and so we have been involved in schools that have very similar ways of operating, and which is for us the GPS network. And so we've tried really hard to say that we should be doing this together and talking to each other. With the GPS, the students actually got together and identified that they could reduce the amount of water bottles happening at the big sporting events. And so that was a really lovely way that boys across schools identified issues they could work on together. At the moment, we're working on a art installation project with some schools up and down the North Shore. So some girls' schools and some schools that come to our Earth Hour breakfast. So it's maintaining a relationship after you've had the conversations at maybe a gathering. And those schools we're going to meet in November and come together and share our plastics. So bringing art into the sort of the way we're operating, but it is sharing with the other schools. And locally, our council-run network is a really lovely way that we're locally sort of we have movie nights at the local Lane Cove Primary School, and we share our solar sort of any resource we get, we share with the local schools in a network. And it was about just saying to council, we would like to connect locally, and we probably some key teachers in the network run the network when council staff turn over quite a bit, but which is a bit sad. But we do have a really lovely council network locally. So hope, Angela, that sort of helps encourage people to talk to their council for help and talk to their local schools around them as well, which are filled with really lovely people trying to do the same thing. So it's good to help. So there you go.
Yeah, thanks so much, Sue. That's really kind of interesting to hear the kinds of relationships that you guys have been able to develop with local councils. I might now turn over to Melanie for a moment, because Melanie, you're obviously an organisation that works closely with schools and to try and support them in their education work. And one of the questions that's come through to us via our Twitter conversation this afternoon is, how does an organisation such as the Zoo balance the priorities of educating visitors and students to the school with your role as a conservation organisation?
Yeah, that's a great question. I did see that one come up, and I've actually got some of my team sitting beside me, and we all kind of had different ideas about how we'd answer that question. So balancing conservation priorities and education priorities, we don't really see those as distinct things. They're really an integrated package, I suppose, if you like. I think by really, you know, our core business is about conservation. We are a conservation organisation. So I suppose it's taking that baseline and it's thinking about conservation issues or ecological sustainability issues, taking a specific issue, whether it's about, for example, conflict minerals in the Congo related to gorillas and gorilla habitat, we would take that particular issue and then we would build the educational content around that. So that's also meaning that we have to take an integrated approach to that as well. So it might be looking at or tapping into understandings from ecology, from biology, from you know, other sciences as well as social sciences as well, looking at culture and social structure there and how that impacts on that ecological issue or that conservation issue. It may be looking at political situations as well and how that impacts on gorillas, or it might be looking at the the economy in that country and how that's also influencing the behaviours that are impacting on gorillas. So by doing that, we're able to provide something that's really quite rich. It's very integrated. It's pulling in a lot of learning outcomes. And then if we overlay that, I mean, that's just that's dealing with the curriculum, I suppose, and dealing with the understanding part. By overlaying that, we're quite conscious of the way that we would have students operate in that. So we would be asking them to work together in small groups. We'd be asking them their opinions of these situations. We would be engaging their value system by asking them to clarify how they feel about these things and how they feel about situations that may be unfair, and having those discussions as well. So that's really building on some of their skills and their value systems and their knowledge as well, all in one package, I suppose. So that's how we get around that. We don't look at it as they're competing outcomes or competing needs. We actually take the conservation issue and then build from that. So that's how we've tackled that, and that's probably the most exciting thing about the change that we're experiencing at the moment, is that we can really now use that as our baseline. Conservation is our baseline, where I think in the past we've kind of moved from a situation where we went curriculum first and curriculum outcomes first, and now we've flipped that on its head, and we're using that conservation issue or the conservation outcome that we're looking for, and then built into it all the different areas of the curriculum that's going to support, as well as personal learning as well. So I suppose that's how I would answer that. I'm hoping that answers it accurately for others.
Yeah, look, thank you so much, Melanie. It's a really kind of fascinating to hear you talk about that integrated approach that you guys use as an organisation, where you are taking, I suppose, what started as a conservation organisation and have now expanded it to address so many, I suppose, rich integrated ideas in terms of politics, ethics, values, and so on. I just think it's fantastic, the kind of work that you guys are doing over there. I might now kind of steer the conversation somewhat to some questions that have come in from teachers who are in the primary sector, because what they're kind of interested in is not only some of these big picture, broad ideas that we have, but also some more practical suggestions about what they can do on an everyday kind of level. We had a question coming in from a teacher from a primary school who is interested in establishing her green team and is very much in the preliminary stages. And she's kind of wondering, what can I do to get things started? How can I kick things off in a nice, easy, quick manner? And I might throw this one over to Jason, because Jason, you've been involved in many, many years seeing what different sorts of schools are doing in different sorts of contexts, whether it be throughout the year or perhaps during their Enviro Week programs. Perhaps you can share with us, Jason, some of the most inspiring or interesting things that you've seen teachers try and implement in their schools, which are pretty quick and easy to implement.
Sure. I think the important thing before you start any project, particularly something like this that may not be universally accepted at a school, is to first find your allies and also identify any potential blockers or barriers. So the first thing I would do is go and have a chat to the principal. From teachers that I've spoken to, they said principal on side, assistant principal, a key person at the school, the business manager, someone who might have some money for you is always good, the parents group. So find some allies first and identify any potential blockers. And then when you're getting the kids together, I was at a school yesterday as part of the Principal for a Day program, which I've been lucky enough to be involved in for the last 4 or 5 years. And the kids there asked me the same question: how do we get this thing going? We've got our meetings at lunchtime and we're having trouble getting kids to attend. I said, well, I think we've just identified your first problem. Kids don't want to necessarily give up their lunch hour to come and sit and hear about more stuff they have to do. So we went through a whole lot of different scenarios, and one was speaking to a sympathetic teacher about potentially having 10 minutes at the end of the lesson to introduce to the class what's going on, how you're going to do it, is there any funding required, is it going to be part of the curriculum, is it outside of the curriculum, what parents will be involved. So I think without getting down to the absolute specifics of the of setting up a green team, my key things are finding allies, identifying barriers, and having your meetings and get-togethers at a really good time for all the stakeholders. You might, you know, meet the parents when they come in of their, you know, the parent council night. Maybe you have 15 minutes to identify who can help you there. Get some key leaders in the school, whether it be the business manager, assistant principal, whoever that might be. So, yeah, I think planning is very important with these things, rather than, you know, rushing out and start digging up part of the oval and calling it your veggie patch. I think planning and design is the time spent on that. I think you probably want to spend, you know, 70% on your time with the planning and design, and then you move on to the implementation. So get the key stakeholders on board, get the important peeps, and find a way to duck around any potential blockers or barriers that you may need to avoid.
Thank you so much, Jason. That seems like a really kind of practical set of guidelines in terms of getting a kind of strategic plan in place before you actually kind of get stuck into the initial activities to get those students involved. Love those thinking and those ideas. Now, we've only got a few minutes left in this afternoon's webinar, and it might be kind of interesting if I go around the different members of the panel and perhaps ask them if there were any sorts of top tips that they might suggest to teachers who are wanting to inspire action in their schools. I'm kind of conscious of the fact that different participants here in our panel this afternoon come from a variety of different backgrounds and will be able to share some of the different sorts of experiences and ideas that they may have. So, Britt, I might kind of pass over to you. If you had one top tip to suggest to someone who's watching our webinar this afternoon, what would be your #1 suggestion for them?
I think partnerships are really important, and like Jason was talking about, find your allies. So I think sustainability educators often get overloaded with the enormity of the task, but if you've got some people who support you, they don't need to be into your own school, they could be anywhere, then you can sort of lean on each other a bit and bounce ideas off each other. So find some partners and with similar ideas, and then you can go a lot further together than you can. And there's a famous African proverb about if you want to go far, go alone. Sorry, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And I think that's a lovely way of thinking about sustainability education.
Yeah, thank you so much, Britt. That's a beautiful proverb, isn't it? I might now pass over to Kirsty for a few moments. Now, Kirsty, you've been involved in this space for a long, long time as part of this community organisation of Ceres, and you've seen many students and many schools and many participants come through your workshops. Tell me a little bit about some of the rewards that you have experienced yourself, both personally and professionally, and then perhaps you can tell us one of your top tips to finish up.
Well, I am so honoured to be working in the environmental education space because I get to mash my two passions, which is environment and education, together. And for other people out there who have got that, you'll know that often it's the feeling of being in your element. Sometimes people talk about how students are the leaders of tomorrow, and I'd actually argue they are leading now. And you'd actually say that students in schools are leading more than their adults and their parents and their families. And so something that I've found that's been really inspiring and rewarding is, I don't know, we all have these moments where we're really worried about the future of our world, and I see this incredible stuff happening. So on a personal level, I just think it's incredible what's happening in schools, and I'm an ex-primary school teacher myself. I know how hard yakka it can be, and it's incredible what people achieve. My top tip would be, there are two great books, and I reckon I should almost take some royalties from the authors because I promote them all the time. But the first book is called Switch, and it's by Chip and Dan Heath. I'll tweet it. I'll tweet the link to it. This changed my world in terms of thinking about how to engage people in sustainability. And the other great book is by an Australian writer called Les Robinson, who's actually a psychologist, and he talks about how to create behaviour change in your school. And based on what Britt was saying before, it's actually a bit of a step-by-step guide of how to implement a project with your students and yourself, thinking about not falling into the trap of finding a problem and announcing a solution straight away, but creating a buzz and getting people excited. So I'll tweet both those links, but I would recommend Switch by Chip and Dan Heath and Changeology by Les Robinson. And I think there's so much support out there for teachers. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Thanks, Ange.
Thanks so much, Kirsty. And for those of us who are based in New South Wales, that's where Les is actually based. And I know that he does run a number of workshops and seminars in New South Wales. So I'll also post some of those details for those teachers who may be interested in following up with some of Les's workshops and seminars. All right, I now may pass over to Melanie from the Zoo. Melanie, what would be your hot tip to teachers?
Okay, well, in this discussion, I was thinking of really two things have come to mind. One of the things that, like Kirsty was just promoting some things. One of the things that we would probably suggest to teachers that might be interesting is the work of Douglas Mackenzie Moore, who works in social-based marketing. We take a lot of his findings, I suppose, and apply those to our community conservation campaigns. So when I went to see him, one of the big take-home messages for me was about barriers and also about getting people on board. So reducing barriers, reducing excuses, and reducing any way that it's difficult to actually act for in pro-conservation or pro-sustainability ways, that you reduce or remove those barriers as much as you can, and you make that behaviour really, really convenient. The other thing, and I think, I suppose we're preaching to the converted here. Everyone who's part of this today, you probably already have a really strong value system that values sustainability and values and is involved in pro-environmental and sustainability behaviours. But I think the reality is not everyone that you work with or you come in contact with or your school community or parents have that value system as well, so are naturally inclined to try and do those behaviours just from their own value system, I suppose. So another thing that he really kind of promotes is this idea that other people might do those behaviours but for a different reason. But if we're trying to get these behaviours to occur and to make systemic change in organisations and get things being normative behaviours, that sometimes, even though it might bother us that they don't have the same drives as we do or have the same reasons for doing it, that you can hook into some of these other ideas, whether it is based on concerns about health or concerns about safety or all of these other things that people might be willing to change their behaviour. You're able to hook into those ideas as well, so and get those people on board. As soon as it's a normative behaviour, then you've started this kind of a move towards, mass change, and something just becomes the way that you do things, and people follow. So I know that's not, we want people to have a value system like ours, but I suppose it's also a way that you can hook into other people's value systems or things that are really front of mind for them and get them to be part of your change as well. So that's one thing that, particularly the barrier part of that idea, is one thing that we apply quite a lot here. Whenever we create a campaign, we look at what are the excuses that people are going to have not to do that change that we want them to do. So if we're asking them to donate mobile phones and recycle mobile phones, then we take every barrier that we can possibly think of out of the equation so that it is so easy for them to do that behaviour. And once that starts to become a behaviour, it's just a normal way of approaching their everyday life, then you've kind of hooked them into that pro-sustainability behaviour that you want them to do. So that's, I suppose, one of my tips there is when you're working in schools and maybe your colleagues are not as excited about environmental issues, that you can approach them in other ways. If it's your principals, they might be interested in funding or saving money at their school, or they might be interested in the way you can promote a school, and this might be another way to say that, we have all of these different opportunities for kids, and this is one way that we can show leadership. There might be leadership programs in sport, leadership programs in the arts, make a leadership program in environmental areas as well, and it's a way that they can promote that to parents as something that's really exciting happening in their school and an opportunity for kids to express their individuality. So they're kind of the two things that jump to mind there.
Thanks so much, Melanie. Essentially, I think what you're saying is that you're tricking people into being sustainable. I like your sneaky thinking style. That's great. Look, now we've got two more panellists that we want to hear from before we wrap up this afternoon. So I'll pass over to Sue next. Sue, what would be your hot tip for teachers?
Thanks, Ange. I'll be quick because there are lots of, I think keeping it fun, simple, just taking on one thing at a time and building it up really slowly and celebrating when the one thing goes right. But I think the tip that I was going to think of, to suggest was using what already happens in your school and value adding with an environment is a tip. And for me, that is, we have a school fete, and so I try and get an element of our environment program in the school fete. Well, we have Year 12 awards, so I've asked, could there be an environment award for the Year 12s, and they've said yes. So it's just using what we've got and adding a little bit to it. It is about celebrating, and we've got an environment badge that's given to just one head person to acknowledge that they've contributed. So it is using some of the reward systems in your school and tapping into it, and so that's a tip from me, Ange.
Thanks so much, Sue. Especially in a school that is so busy as Riverview is, it's important to try and add on to what those existing programs already are. We'll now pass over to Jason, our final panellist for this afternoon. So, Jason, what would be your hot tip for teachers?
I'm supportive of everything I've heard, so I've had to keep changing my tips as it's gone through. So I would like to put the suggestion of finding some unexpected allies. And by that I mean people who other people in your school would not expect to be supportive of what you're doing and your programs. How you get them across, how you do it, each person's going to have a different way you can get to them. But if you can bring that unexpected ally on who someone goes, geez, well, if they're a part of it, I've got no excuse for being a part of it, let's jump on board. So, you know, reach out a bit further than the usual suspects, get someone who mightn't be expected, and you'll find that it breaks down a lot of barriers with the other people at the school, the teachers, the kids, whoever it might be, whether it's the cool kid who just thought that, you know, this green stuff wasn't for them. Get that unexpected ally, and I think you can really fast-track some of your programs.
Lovely. Thanks so much, Jace. That is a great innovative idea. It's kind of, I suppose, somewhat challenging at times to think outside the box, but that's a great innovative approach that teachers could try and use. I think it's about time for us to wrap up our panel discussion this afternoon. So I'd like to start by thanking each of our 5 panellists. We had Britt Gow from Hawkesdale College, Jason Kimberley from Cool Australia, Kirsty Costa from Ceres, Melanie Treweek from Melbourne Zoo, and Sue Martin from St Ignatius Riverview. So thank you so much to our panellists for joining in this afternoon, and thank you to you at home, as I said, whether you're sitting on your lounge, sitting at your desk, or sitting in the staff room. Thanks so much for listening into our webinar this afternoon. If you'd like to continue the conversation, remember that we will be on Twitter for the next half hour or so and into the evening. Our hashtag is EFSChat, so we'd like to ask you to continue the conversation. And for those teachers and schools around the country who are interested in Cool Australia's Enviro Week, please remember that it's not too late to register. All you need to do is head to our website, www.enviroweek.org. So thank you so much for participating in our webinar this afternoon, and we hope to see you next time in Cool Australia's online community. Thanks, and goodbye to everyone for this afternoon.